In this lesson, we will be discussing Autodesk Inventor's user interface. The interface is made up of three main areas. We have the application window, the model browser, and the ribbons. To start with, let's discuss the ribbons. The ribbons encompass the top of your window. This is where all your commands and tools are kept. If you've used Microsoft Office, the ribbons may look familiar to you. Microsoft developed the ribbons and have pushed them out to their partners. Autodesk is a Microsoft Windows compliant software. Therefore, they had to create the ribbons to be compliant for Microsoft. The ribbons are a very powerful tool, and I think you'll come to like them. With the ribbons, it gives you all of the commands that you may need to draw and create objects. They are actually contextually sensitive. And what that means is, if we come in here and select an object, or we select a part, for example here, and we delve into that part, all the way down to the sketch level, you'll notice that the ribbons have actually changed. The ribbons are smart enough to know what environment you're in and adapt to that environment. Inventor is made up of many different tools that help you get the job done faster. One of the great things about the ribbons is they have some really good help. If we come up here and we hold our mouse for just a second, it tells us what the tool does and even gives us a graphical representation of it. In this case, it just gives us a little picture to tell us, hey, this is a revolve and this is how it works. Some tools take it to the next level. If we hover over Fillet, for example, not only does it give us a detailed description of how it works, it'll actually give us a little video and show us the fillet tool in action. It tells us how to modify a fillet, how to create a fillet, and what to do when we're done with that fillet. In addition to the main ribbon tab, you'll notice there's additional ribbons that do additional functions. In this course, we do not have time to go through every ribbon and every tool that is available in every ribbon, but to just give you a brief overview of some of the basics, I'll go through the main toolbars that you may need to use. As we dive into each part of each feature, we will discuss it in depth, but there are a few ribbons that you need to know ahead of time. The Tools ribbon, this is where we can get information. This has our distance for measure, and more importantly, it has our application options. This is where you set things like background color of the menu, you can adjust font sizes, you can adjust everything about the screen in the application options. We can also go in here and we can adjust hardware options, we can adjust display options. There's a lot of information in here that allows us to adapt Inventor to our needs. I'm not going to go through every window once again, but I just want you to know where it is if someone else tells you to go there. The next tool is Document Settings. This is important because this is where you set your units. This is how we determine if it's metric or imperial. This also has some information about modeling dimension display. We'll get into more detail later on. The next ribbon tab is Manage. I told you you could adjust your background color in the Tools tab, but in the Manage tab, we can actually adjust the color of the part. This is where we have our styles and we can go in and edit our different materials. Inventor comes with many materials already built in the box that we can do many different things with. But for the most part, this is where you'd go if we needed to modify it. Once again, I'm not going to get into detail in this lesson, but later on we will go into the styles a little bit more. The next tab is the Views tab. This is what gives us the display of our current object. We can set things like shadows and reflections and ground planes, and we can get into quarter and section views later. The Environmental tab, what this does is this allows us to go into different environments. This is where if you have Inventor Pro, you can go into stress analysis. You can go into the Inventor Studio tool that allows you to do photorealistic renderings. We can do different levels of analysis. We can convert it to sheet metal. We can manage our different add-ins. If you have a third-party add-in, this is the tab you would add to it. Next tab is the Getting Started tab. This is where we can get back to our welcome screen. This is a very powerful screen that comes up when you first open Inventor. This has our recent file, our new open. This also has some very good interactive tutorials and skill builders. Takes us out to the internet and go out to Autodesk Exchange, possibly 360 if your company uses that. There's some very powerful tools in here. At the same time, if you don't want the screen to pop up and bug you every time when you open Inventor, come down here and uncheck this display at startup. Hit close, and it'll never come back and bug you. For whatever reason, if you need to come back to it, you can come up here and click welcome. On the screen, you will also notice some additional tools and tutorials that may help you more in the future. If I come back to the assembly level, we'll notice that my tab changes to the assembly tab, and we have my assembly level options. Some options are the same, some options have changed. We now have things like Content Center, Frame Generator. We have the assembly modeling tools. We have the inspect tools that allow us to analyze and measure parts. As we go through the different tabs, they adjust for the different environments. Up at the top, we have the quick access toolbar. This toolbar is always there. What this allows us to do is start a new drawing or a new model, or allows us to open a model or assembly or part. We can save. You have your familiar undo, redo. We have our update, and I'll explain what this does later. We have our selection tools. It allows us to control what we select. Then we have some material handling and appearance tools that I'll get into later on. And the last thing with the ribbons is we have what I call the big eye. This is what takes you into the old file menu. This is where you have your regular new open save. This is where we can export. This is where we can adjust our eye properties. This is where you go to print or plot, different tools like that. If you wish to adjust the quick access toolbar, quick tip here is you hit these two arrows, and it'll actually let you add additional tools to this. One I always like to add is I add the print command, and then I always add the distance measuring command. Two of the commands I use all the time, so I like to have them in there. If you don't adjust materials of parts often, we can actually come in here and remove the materials browser. We don't necessarily need to have all the materials and material browsers all appear at the top if we don't use them. So quickly I can come down here and adjust how I want something to look and turn off the tools that I no longer need. The next area we're going to discuss is the model browser. What this allows us to do is have a history of this part. What makes Inventor so powerful is that it's a parametric modeler. What that means is Inventor remembers how you create parts. It remembers design intent. The design intent is how you wanted something to be created or modeled. If we come into this part, for example, this shackle, I can actually come in here and edit the fillet down here to whatever size I need it to be. Change it to, say, 0875, hit OK, and it updates that fillet. In AutoCAD, I would have had to draw a sketch and revolve or sweep it around and recreate some kind of solid to be able to modify that. Inventor remembers how I created it and allows me to change it in the browser. I can also find parts in the browser. So, for example, if I come back to the back, or I don't know where a part is, I can right-click and I can say Find in Window. It'll highlight it for me. If I needed to see this inner part, I can turn off the outer case. So now I can see the inner case. I can actually go into sub-assemblies if I need to, turn off bits and pieces, add bits and pieces. All this is done through the model browser. The model browser has different icons for different tools. You'll notice that we have a part here, and I can tell that because this icon is a single part. We have an assembly, which to me looks like a little stack of Legos with the blue one on top. And this tells me that that's an assembly part. I come down here, I have a part, but it's a sheet metal part. It gives me a little bin there. And it gives you all your different part types based on these little icons. Pay attention to what these icons are. As we go on, we'll discuss them a little bit more in depth. The browser actually changes to your environment as well. As we come in here and edit or modify parts by double-clicking on them in the browser, you'll notice my ribbons change at the top, but then my model browser also changes to the left and highlights what I'm working on. Makes it very easy to get back to the correct part. If you have multiple parts that look very similar, sometimes it's hard to figure out which part it is in the browser you're editing. This allows you to quickly visually see what part it is that you're editing. Lastly, but certainly not least, we have the application window. This is where all the magic happens. This is where you actually create your geometry that will become your part. Inside this window, we have some very basic options that allow us to do some very powerful things. To start with, we have a UCS. AutoCAD users, don't freak out. This UCS is nothing like the AutoCAD UCS. This just lets us know which way is up. Think about it as marking a box as this way is up whenever you're working on something. This just tells us, hey, that this is the X, Y, and Z direction. This is not the UCS. We do not have to modify it. It just gives us a quick reference to let us know where we are in time and space. We also have some visualization tools over here that allow us to rotate, zoom, pan. We'll get into that in another lesson. Down at the bottom, we have the status bar. What this is as I go through different options, it'll come up here and ask me what I'm doing. But down here, it's kind of like the AutoCAD command line. It's telling me to select components. It's asking me for input. This is where we go when we get lost to know what to do next. Inventor's telling me down in the bottom left-hand corner that I need to select components. This is how I know what I'm doing. And then over on the far right-hand side, as you get into larger and larger assemblies, we get into a very important tool. This is the capacity meter. What the capacity meter tells us is how many parts are inside this model and how many occurrences there are of each part. You'll notice if I hover over this, it tells me there's 22 open documents in this session, but there's also 22 total occurrences. If I were to drop, say, this combo assembly in here, I'm not adding additional files to my model, but I'm adding additional occurrences. Inventor works on a file hierarchy system, meaning that if that file is in there more than one time, it doesn't add all the extra overhead of adding another file every single time. It just adds another occurrence of it. This is how Inventor is so powerful and uses so little memory. So the more of these combo assemblies I add, you'll notice the more occurrences I get, but I still only have 22 open documents. What that means is you can open some just huge assemblies and not have to have some giant supercomputer from NASA to be able to do that. The last thing we're going to talk about the user interface is the help. Up at the top, we have the box for help. Inventor will also go out to the internet and look for help. By default, Inventor's help is internet-based. You can download the help files to your local system. If you don't have access to the internet, you can get your IT guys to do that for you. We also have the communication center where we can get information back on product updates and announcements. And then we have the standard help commands. This is where we can do what's new, shortcuts, and learning tools, where we can get support from Autodesk. And also, if you have a network license, this is where you can go to check it out. The help is very powerful in Inventor. I greatly encourage you, if you get stumped, use the help. So in this lesson, we discussed the application window where we create our geometry, our model browser where our history is kept for our parts, and the ribbon interface.